What's up, guys? It's Anderson 977 here today to do One Piece. Yes, that's right. One Piece chapter 752 review. Now, I know that this chapter of One Piece is a bit late, but as I tend to say, better late than never. I actually recorded this episode of One Piece, this chapter review of One Piece last week, but for some reason when I was recording it, it didn't record. So now, since there was no One Piece new series, since there was no new One Piece chapter this week, I just decided to do this review then and get it out of the way. So, in this chapter of One Piece, well, as you would have already known, it picks up where we left off with Luffy and Law trapped in that corner on Uzi, and Doflamingo is ambushing them. But as it turns out, Doflamingo begins talking with them, and he begins saying like, why would Law pick someone like Luffy because Luffy is dumb? He doesn't see why Law would side with Luffy, and he even begins to talk about Luffy's abilities in terms of a comrades that Luffy always has around him. He says that he's even surprised that in this situation, given the use of his cage bird ability, and he's surprised that Luffy is even able to make comrades under these circumstances as well. So that was kind of like a hats off to Luffy. And then right at that point when we see him like moving to try to take them down, we see the Abdullah brothers come out from nowhere and hack and slash up the body, and then the top half of the body just begin immediately to turn into strings, and Law saying that those strings, that was actually a clone or a puppet from the flamingo. It's not real body. And then at that point, we see them meet up with Luffy, and then they begin to explain that Luffy in turn was tricked by the big muscle dude into running into the into the tunnel, and then they were then duped by Doflamingo coming in behind them to try to get in there and finish off Law and Luffy, but it didn't work out. So now all of a sudden Luffy hears the news that everyone is now at least on the second stage, right? And he's pissed. So what does he do? He does a massive elephant gun and blast through that entire tunnel, and he actually made, as was remarked by the Abdullah brothers, he made a shortcut in that instant, and now they are all back on their way on the hunt, on the run towards the flamingo. And we see glimpses here and there in the chapter of Pika versus Zoro and Fujitora versus Sabo, which is good, but we're all expecting to see those in-depth fights. The fights, the big fights are already lining up. Zora versus Pika, Fujitora versus Sabo. They're already lining up pretty nicely, and I expect them to continue to line up before we really get to the big main fight, which appears to be Luffy versus Law. Luffy versus the Flamingo. And in this whole commotion, what is also mentioned is that Law says, right? Law says that upon the first memory, no, sorry, not Law. The Flamingo says that upon his first memory of Law to the other executive members, we begin to see the flashback of Law as a kid, and Law comes up to them and says that he wants to join them crew, and he's threatening them, right? He attached bombs all over his body, and he's willing to give his life because why? He says he wants to join them because he wants to kill the humans, he wants to kill the people, he wants to make people suffer. So the Law back then from the Law that we know now is a lot different. It seems like he was a lot darker in his past. Yeah, his past, his original upbringing was a lot darker than what we see from him now. And it's said by even Doflamingo himself. Well, Law himself says that he was saved by Doflamingo's younger brother, Corazon. Law says that he was saved by Corazon. So we probably get the whole explanation of everything, how that all happens, the whole lowdown and Law's background story, which seems to be interesting. And also another point that I want to add is that in the last panels of this week's chapter of One Piece, we see Doflamingo having a key in his hand, flipping it up, playing with it. Right? We see Doflamingo with a key. Now we know that Violet and those other guys have lost key, and they are trying to meet with Luffy on Sunflower Hills and the fourth level to give him that key. But at the same time, Doflamingo has a key. So now you're beginning to question, why would Doflamingo have a key if, at this point in time, the only relevant key that would be needed would be the key for Law Seastone Scuffs. Why would Doflamingo have a key? I guess in the next upcoming chapters of One Piece, we'll get to see what happens, which should be next week, actually. So overall, I thought it was a good chapter of One Piece. That's it. That's my review. Remember to rate, comment, subscribe. Sayonara.